That was a wonderful presentation by Mr. Kalyan Ashish Pathak from Antilia Scientific. So just to give you a quick update that we have 1,100 delegates watching live at this moment. Now we move on to our next panel session of the day on the topic on food fortification and health, enriching foods, enriching lives. And to discuss on this panel session, some of the key pointers that would be discussed here will be on formulation of standards and regulatory support for staple food fortification, advantages and limitations of staple food fortification, mandatory versus voluntary approach for staple food fortification, and many more. And to discuss on this topic, I would like to introduce in the order of sequence Mr. Atul Joshi, who is the Chief General Manager Quality for Patanjali. Joining Mr. Joshi, we have Kajal Debnath, Chief Regulatory Officer for DSM Food. Next, we have Dr. Jagmeet Madan, National President, Indian Dietetic Association. Joining Dr. Madan, we have Ms. Rohini Saran, Project Lead Nutrition from PATH. Next, we have Dr. Mini Varghese, Country Director for Nutrition International. Now, I would like to introduce the moderator for the panel session, who is Ms. Deepti Gulati, Head of Programs for Global Alliance and Improved Nutrition. Thank you. Ms. Gulati, since you being the moderator for the panel session, I request you to take it ahead from here.
Okay, thank you so much. Friends, it's a great privilege and honor to be on this panel with such stalwarts in food nutrition and specifically food fortification. So you have all been introduced to the panel, so you know how brilliant this panel is. Now, we would start with fortification, and to set the stage, I would just like to share with you, though you already know, that food fortification is one of the most effective complementary strategy in addition to dietary diversity and micronutrient supplements. Why we say it is a complementary strategy? Because getting your micronutrients, that is vitamins and minerals, which are very critical for your health. And these days, I'm sure you are hearing so much about the immunity boosters. So micronutrients are nothing but the immunity boosters. So these are very essential to have in our daily diet. But unfortunately, in India, we have a very high deficiency of micronutrients. These micronutrients are basically present in fruits and vegetables in the largest amount. And of course, they're present in cereals and pulses. They're also present in milk and oil, but in limited amount. But we need the dose of micronutrients on a very regular basis to keep ourselves healthy and to keep our systems going and also to boost up our immunity. Dietary diversification, that is having a diversified diet, having enough of fruits, vegetables, cereals, milk and milk products, besides cereals and pulses, is the best choice. But sometimes affordability, accessibility, and availability of these micronutrients through the food is compromised. That's when we say that, okay, let's supplement our diet with some micronutrient supplements like multivitamin, capsules, tablets, so on and so forth. And the other very effective, very easy to do strategy is food fortification. We all know that all of us are consuming 5 basic staples on a daily basis. These are rice, wheat flour, salt, milk, and oil. Whether we take fruits or not, whether we take vegetables or not, but these 5 basic things we are consuming on a daily basis. These are called staples. So, if we are consuming these foods on a daily basis, it is considered very wise and sensible to add micronutrients to these staples. All staples cannot be fortified with all the micronutrients. So what FSSAI, that is the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, nutrition sector, people in the development sector, they all got together and felt that wheat flour and rice with iron, folic acid, and vitamin B12, and salt with iodine and iron, we perhaps would be in a position to reduce the levels of anemia, that is the khoon ki kami in the population. Secondly, India also has a very high burden of vitamin A and vitamin D deficiency. These are fat soluble vitamins. Hence, milk and oil are the best suited food vehicles to fortify these with vitamin A and D. This process of adding micronutrients to the basic staples, so that when we consume these staples, we also consume these micronutrients, is called fortification. Fortification is very cost effective, easy to do. It costs less than 2 paisa per liter of milk, less than 5 paisa per kg of wheat flour, less than 10 paisa per kg of oil, and same with the salt. Of course, with rice, the cost is a little higher, but then rice is also a high commodity, high price commodity. But these are all affordable, and industry has been trained to do it. Government is all for fortification, and it has included food fortification is one of these strategies in its Poshan Abhiyan. With this background, let's learn more about fortification, why it is so good, and what are the different views from people who are working in the industry, people who are in academia, people who are in the development sector. So we would open this panel discussion with my first question, which I would request Dr. Mini Verghese to respond to, that what are the key areas that a government should focus on for implementing staple food fortification program under the social food safety net programs. Why I'm asking this for the food social net safety net programs is that PDS, ICDS, MDM, these are the three basic programs which are for the people as a food safety net. And why government should be focusing on that? Over to Mini.
Yeah, thank you, Deepti, for the question. Very apt, and we know that the social safety net program is one of the program that reaches to the most vulnerable thing. So my response to your question is primarily edging from the fact that the necessary background work to making sure that the programs and the supply side driven activities with the industry has been completed. So once it has been completed, what is that government should do to making sure that an effective programming in social safety net program? I would say that 4 key things. First is a long-term commitment and uninterrupted supplies. A long-term commitment is important because fortification is not a magic bullet. It doesn't happen with the overnight. We need to have a long-term political commitment to say that fortification is going to be there. The point on the uninterrupted supplies, fortification is only making sure that 30 to 50% of the requirement of essential nutrition is reaching. So you will not be able to achieve the nutritional outcome which we expected in a day or in a few months. So therefore, it is important that there is an uninterrupted supplies, which is often an issue in our programs, so that there is an uninterrupted supplies for a long time. Number 2, what governments should invest, and it should be very, very put all effort is on the quality. I would say quality, because quality makes the change. So which for ensuring good quality products at the while at the level of the production level, while we put safeguards. As government, they need to establish laboratories and then using the findings to take corrective actions, informing the industries to making sure that adequately quality products have been supplied within the thing. Any dent in the quality is a big black spot or black mark on the program, and so the gains what otherwise we should have it, we lose out poor quality program. Third thing I would say that, regular monitoring and review of the program is important. So I would say that, and the last is awareness is a very key thing. So with that, I would stop, and Diptiji, thank you for this question, and I know my other panelists would take out other details. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minnie. And you have mentioned how good fortification is and how it can help to improve the nutritive value of the food and the nutritional status of people in India through the food safety net programs. And you've also mentioned about the quality and other parameters. But and we would be coming back to the industry, but I would like to go back to the academia, and I would like to request Dr. Jagmeet Madan to tell us, is food fortification really a silver bullet as we all think it is? And can it help to eradicate micronutrient malnutrition, or does it only complement the efforts in improving health?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Deepti. Thank you so much for, first of all, this opportunity, and I thank the organizers for having me on board in such a good and a very relevant panel discussing something which we should be discussing in today's time. So answering your question, Deepti, I think as a nutritionist and as an academician, to my mind, when I look at micronutrient malnutrition, the synonymous word is the quality of diet. Right?
Yes.
And again, another synonymous word to quality of diet is the diet diversity. And
yes,
I feel that, fortification is not a magic bullet, which will eradicate micronutrient malnutrition. I think what is needed is definitely empowerment of people, population, to understand what is diet diversity, and to achieve that diet diversity from the locally available foods, which are seasonal, economical. I think that is the first step of empowerment of people at large. That's point number one. Fortification is a stepping stone, is a complementary strategy, which can help, where we feel that there is a need to intervene. And this is a vulnerable group, this is a vulnerable population. And I think this decision has to be based on evidence. So let me put one very relevant point here is that we as nutritionists, we as academicians, I'm talking, on behalf of the fraternity and the Dietetic Association, we feel that there is a lacuna of reliable, credible, dynamic dietary data in India, which needs to be generated, on a continuous basis. Unless and until we have this robust data with us, taking this decision that everything should be fortified, everyone should be consuming fortified food, I think it is like taking a lot of decisions on us without realizing, where the implications are. So to my mind, the first step is empowering the population to understand diet diversity using their locally available and seasonal foods, and through nutrition education. I think education is empowerment and it can be achieved. And second, yes, we should generate the dynamic data which tells us that, okay, this is the vulnerable group which needs specific intervention. And that is where we strategize and we use a vehicle to fortify and then also see the impact. I think the impact studies are also very important. So two things very important. One is generation of the dynamic, reliable, credible, robust data. And second is see the outcome. And, these are the threads which will give us more confidence that should we engage with more population or no. So these are my thoughts.
Thank you so much for putting it so succinctly. But here I must also add that Government of India has Household Consumer Expenditure Survey, which also gives us a fair idea about what people are consuming. we have comprehensive National Nutrition Survey, we have National Health and Family Surveys, and of course, the whole responsibility of what you said lies actually with the academia and the associations like the Nutrition Society of India, Indian Dietetic Association, to be investing your fraternity into giving advice to the policymakers as well as to the practicing people in the development sector. But you very rightly said, I want to endorse it, and I said it in the beginning also, that food fortification we consider is only as a complementary strategy. It provides 25 to 30% of a person's day's requirement, and we are only adding it to the staples so that it helps to bridge the gap between the need and the requirement. Definitely, as I said earlier, dietary diversification is very, very critical. But in today's time, no, I'm not talking of COVID, even pre-COVID era, the affordability of a diversified diet, which is highly nutritious, sometimes becomes a challenge. I'm not saying it is always so, but sometimes it does. And when we talk about creating awareness, again, I feel that it is the role of the academia. You have a whole army of young nutritionists. You should be sending them to the community in the community nutrition program and educating people how to improve their quality of diet. So we are pushing a lot of responsibility on you, ma'am, so that we can improve our nutritional status.
Yeah.
And now,
Deepti, I want to take your statement and tell you that, pre-COVID and during COVID and in these times, I think the fraternity of nutrition and dietetics, and I talk on behalf of my association, we worked very closely with the government, and we have created innumerable resources. And I think the dissemination of credible nutrition knowledge has reached a very, very good state. And with the virtual mode in place, I think a lot of people are getting the correct information and are getting empowered. I only wanted to add that.
No, I exactly agree, and I really appreciate, and big clap to you and your organization and all the nutrition fraternity who is pushing it and and creating awareness. So I'm only complimenting and supporting you. And as far as evidence is concerned, I'm very happy to share with you that there are a lot of studies which have shown that at the population level, food fortification has made a difference. And I would come back to that a little later, but I just want that from academia, we move to the food industry. And here my question to Mr. Atul Joshi is that what is the role of food industry in food fortification program, and how favorable are and how supportive are the government policies and the environment to support fortification of staple foods? So over to Mr. Joshi, and looking forward to getting your insights.
Excuse me, ma'am. I just missed initial part of your question. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I said, what is the role of food industry in food fortification program, and how favorable and supportive are the government's policies and a policy environment to support and promote food fortification of staple foods?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and sincere thanks to Sinex for giving me this opportunity to be a part of a speaker panel with such eminent professionals, number one. And my personal belief is that in today's perspective, this topic is very, very, very relevant, number one. If you just see that, I will just give one typical classical definition of food fortification, is that it's an addition of nutrient externally to any food product to improve the overall nutrition status. So after fortification might be the overall nutrition value is equivalent to the natural state or might be more than that. So this basically as a food technologist or food professional, we have learned in all textbook. And when we see that as a consumer, whenever we are consuming food products, so we have to do a lot of processing step before consumption. Like globally, people are consuming wheat in terms of almost 90% of wheat are consumed in the form of wheat flour. and paddy we are consuming in the flour of rice. So before converting wheat to wheat flour or paddy to rice, we have to do a lot of processing. So during those processing, despite of although you are following all the capable processes and you have all qualified process equipment, but there is a lot of loss. In fact, for rice case, when you are doing milling and process polishing, you are losing almost 70 to 90% of vitamin and niacin. So this is unavoidable because processing is unavoidable because of inherent characteristics of food product. So as Dipti ma'am suggested that fortification is the only answer. It's a very structured tool. If we talks about industry, I'm talking about particularly specifically for Patanjali because when FSI has released their notification in 2nd August 2018 regarding food fortification of 5 food products. So after their notification, Patanjali has successfully completed food fortification for 3 food products. We have successfully completed fortification for edible oil, salt, and wheat flour. Till date, we have completed 3,500 ton of wheat flour. And last 2 years, almost every month we are doing fortified edible oil, 7 to 8,000 ton. Our all SKUs in Patanjali edible oil fortified, and 2,500 tons salt we have done fortified and released to the market. Our products, fortified food products, are available throughout the India or in all Patanjali Arogya Kendra, Chikitsa Kendra, Patanjali Mega Store, and general trade also.
Atulji, we would move away from Patanjali. I'm just asking you about how supportive is the government environment for fortification, because we are talking about the science and not about the product.
Okay. When we are talking about this, FSI has basically given a detailed guideline. Number one, they have given complete detail how from where we have to purchase that fortificant or premix. They have given the list of approved vendors. They have given the complete regulation about packaging material, because when you are using packaging material in fortified food product, you have to be display the F+ logo plus other details. They have given complete testing protocol, AACC method for wheat flour. You have to test qualitative analysis through iron spot test kit. For edible oil, you have to do that blue ring test method and half-yearly protocol to do the complete testing from NABL accredited lab for each and every component analysis. And they have given guideline how to do that documentation and record keeping, because ultimately as a food business operator or food manufacturer, you have to ensure the product traceability throughout the supply chain. And FSI also given the complete guideline that you have to do frequent internal audit of your plant, because you have to ensure that your process capability, you have to ensure that your equipment fitness for use. And at the last but not least, that your product release system, it should be included in your quality and food safety management system. These are the basically positive and most important, that because when you are running that, any industry is running food fortification program, so you have to train your manpower. And suppose any industry they are running both SKU fortified and non-fortified both. So you have to follow the cleaning protocol. You have to follow the line clearance method. You have to ensure storage protocol, because you have a different 2 kind of inventories. When you are shipping to the market, you have to follow the transportation protocol. And most important, because for testing all these things, you have to train your all operational team, number one. But most important, this is a bigger picture, is that you have to train the people who are in a sales team, people who are sitting at distributor place, people who are sitting at retailer place. Because when people are this consumer or customer, they are coming in the contact of this sales team. If they have a fair understanding of fortification, so they can change the buying behavior of consumer. Because our personal experience says that for rice and salt, people buying behavior is not as encouraging as if you compare with the edible oil, because there is some change in color, texture, and appearance of that product because of fortification. So second thing that this regulator or FSI, they have given a lot of support for training program for the sales or the frontline people, like CII, GAIN, FSI. They have arranged a lot of training program. So because advantage is one side, we are conducting internal training program. But when your team members, they are attending the this training program and listening the benefits of fortification direct from experts, it impacts a different manner. Second,
Thank you so
this
much. Sorry.
we need one support that GST. It should be exempted from the branded fortified food product is a 5%. It's an incentive for that. And third one is the government should incorporate all the good things about fortification or jingles and run their telecast and broadcast. Because industry can run these kind of program, but when industry is running, so people may think that they are running their hidden agenda. But when government is running, so consumer having a different belief system. और एक लास्ट में एक चीज मैं आपको बोलूंगा मैडम कि व्हेन अगर हम बड़े बिगर पिक्चर वाले रूप में इसको देखेंगे तो हमारे पतंजलि में एक चीज बोलते हैं कि जो व्यक्ति निरोगी होता है वो उपयोगी होता है और जो उपयोगी होता है वो समाज के लिए सहयोगी होता है. सो व्हेन यू आर रनिंग दिस fortification program and you are providing 30 to 40% of their RDA requirement, so you are basically giving more and more healthier people, productive people in the market, in the country, and you are contributing in your GDP effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Atulji, for very lucidly sharing how government is supporting. So this can be very reassuring for the food industry as well as for people at large, for the population, that fortification is a very scientific and rigorously followed process at the food industry level. So it is very safe. The government has taken all the precautions, prepared all the manuals and all the technical support material which would facilitate the food industry to do adequate and appropriate fortification, which would only help the people to consume more nutritious food. With that, I would also like to go to Mr. Kajal Devnath and just want to ask him that Mr. Joshi did mention about the list of premix suppliers and the premix that is available to be added to the food. So how is this source of micronutrient intake important? Are there any, or are there some naturally derived micronutrients that can be made available for fortification, or do we use synthetic? Because even if some people may fear, synthetic are the same vitamins and minerals which we are taking through our multivitamins. So over to you, Kajalji, for your advice on this.
Yeah, so good afternoon, Diptiji, and thank you, Sinex, for having this kind of food fortification session in this nutrition summit. At this time, very important that these are the things which helps. Even in pandemics, a lot of micronutrients are also been provided to all the patients and all. So intake of adequate micronutrient, which you have explained very well, and there is a deficiency in the country and all that. So now, whether, yes, dietary diversification, which many panel members and nutritionists has been explained that is the ultimate thing, but then affordability and many other things which plays a role, for a country like India, where accessibility to natural diversification of all the kind of fruits and vegetables, all that cereals are having question marks. That then this kind of processes of food fortification, which is has been there, in organization like Mother Dairy and all has been doing it for since 1984. But at that time there was no one was there. I mean, to really talk about it. But now in a structured way, this food fortification thing has come. And adequate nutrients. So there were a lot of discussion happened during 2016 when we closely worked in FSCCI and various other stakeholders, and then we framed a lot of FAQs, and I think that will help consumer to talk about. And there was bioavailability is one of the things which a comparative studies has happened, that whether basically the natural vitamins are better or synthetic vitamins, minerals are better. And then there was a very small and insignificant, kind of differences between a synthetic and natural kind of micronutrients has been observed. And I think micronutrients which are produced by plants and animals But there are things like which are chemically synthesized vitamins and minerals and subsequently been extracted and being used, and these are all internationally having accreditation by various accreditation bodies, and having a lot of we are having benefits over a period of time. Like iodine has been used 1962 onwards, and now we have health benefits of it. These micronutrients slowly deposits in our body. In the long run, it gives over a decade of time, and it gives a benefit. So irrespective of whether it's a natural or synthetic, the molecular structure and activity, or the, I would say, potency of this micronutrient remains same. But there are certain natural micronutrients can be done. There are microbial fermentations are being carried out. There are some kind of specific kind of algae are being used for production of vitamin D3. So there are things, but at large, productions of these micronutrients are possible to by using synthetic processes, but hardly in scientific way we did not find any kind of bioavailability kind of issues, at least to my understanding, and what we really work together with FFRC and FSSAI. I think we never found that there was been any kind of things, and because of this kind of myth, there were certain industry players who were not participating in the process of fortification, not supporting, saying that we consume a lot of natural and not to have these. I think those are the things we need to go beyond that. We need to, as a country, need to support this food fortification, which is a complementary strategy, and is also got recognition in our Poshan Abhiyan, in a nutrition policy of the government. I think this is a long way to go, but we made a very good start on this of the embarking of this journey of food fortifications. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Kajalji, for explaining it so well. And now I would like to ask our youngest panelist and a very dynamic panelist, Rohini, because she was with FFRC Food Fortification Resource Center at FSSAI, and she had been coordinating with all the development sector partners who are doing fortification. So, Rohini, we would like to benefit from your experience. Please do share with us what have been the opportunities and challenges in scaling up staple food fortification, and what kind of regulatory support is available in India to encourage staple food fortification. Of course, Joshiji has already explained about the support that is there, but you may like to touch upon that. But I would like you to focus on the opportunities and challenges in scaling fortification. Over to you, Rohini.
Thank you so much, Deepti ma'am, and thank you, Sanex too. I would actually just begin with the regulatory aspect and just quickly add a couple of points to what Dr. Atul has already mentioned. So the regulations are already in place. FSSAI has actually come out with the regulations for processed food as well. So, select processed foods and which are not HFSS at all. So the healthier version is there. So that is one thing. There is a scientific panel based at FSSAI which actually overlooks all of the dosages that are prescribed. So that ensures that there are no toxicity levels that are, exceeded ever. So that ensures safety. Along with that, a lot of the training on food safety officers is done by FSSAI and the development partners as well. A lot of SBCC and advocacy is being done through the Food Fortification Resource Center, which is housed in FSSAI. And like I mentioned, there is a lot of support by the FSSAI. We've been advocating for so long with the government and other departments, and together we've made this happen, along with the support of development partners. Now, moving on to your question regarding the opportunity, I'll be very brief. I feel that the opportunity is that, first of all, this is not a new strategy. So that's the biggest opportunity that we can capitalize on. The content, the scientific data, everything is available. There are scientific studies even from India and impact studies which Dr. Jagmeet mentioned. In fact, PATH recently also published a data where, through rice fortification in Gujarat, we've managed and we've seen the effect of rice fortification. And there were significant reduction in anemia. There was significant increase in the cognitive development. Along with that, I think one of the biggest opportunity is that government is leading it left, right in the center. All of your major flagship programs are there. They all quote fortification as a great intervention, and everybody must capitalize on it. There are partners available in the entire system who provide the technical assistance. So we all come with expertise, and we are happy to provide the same. The private industry, especially the milk and the oil industry, has adopted it as a norm, and now going forward, even rice, wheat, and DFS is picking up. The biggest leverage point for the private industry is that the Plus logo released by the government of India is an identifier. You can use it as an USP. That is something which is an opportunity that the private sector can capitalize on. And the staples that are chosen are for mass communication. So it's not that, it's a supplement, it's a complementary strategy like we've been talking about. The challenges I feel are the first is supply and demand alignment. That's very necessary. In the government sector, it's already in place. The demand is there. Now it's for the private sector to actually come forward and provide the entire supply. The second thing, like was mentioned as well, quality by Dr. Mini, that quality is imperative. It is so essential that quality needs to be done. Now, FSSAI has already given the methods how to analyze these fortificants. There are labs which are being currently capacitated to test for these micronutrients, but there is a lot of quality aspects and internal audits that need to be done by the manufacturers as well. So that is one thing that we need to work on. Another thing is the private sector engagement. Even though the private sector has been very kind, but especially when you look at industries like rice and wheat, it's a very fragmented industry. So here we would like the support of rice millers and wheat flour manufacturers to come through. And over to you, Deepti ma'am. I'm done. Thank you.
Acha, okay. Okay, can you? I think I just got a call from Dr. Deepti. Her net is gone, so I think she is not in a position to connect. So I'll take over from here. So thank you, Rohini. I think that was wonderful what you kind of summarized, and it is very, very encouraging to see that the whole process is standardized, is made very scientific. Resources are available. There is hand holding, and you also gave me some added information that there are impact studies which are now available, and especially Indian data. Which is what we really want in the times to come. The real-time data, where we are and what happens when we subject the population to a fortified food. So I think a question which I would like to ask all the panelists, and maybe I would kind of sum up. I don't know how much time do we have. This is still 1:25, right? Okay. So please alert me when the time is over. So the question which I want to ask to Dr. Mini is that what is your take whether food fortification should be mandatory or voluntary?
Yeah, very pertinent question like that, which often come across so when it comes to mandatory fortification is the ultimate goal, especially for staples and for the staples which reach the largest population and especially most vulnerable, that's the thing. So that's also the reason that 5 food vehicles also we consider for staple fortification. Why we should also understand that mandatory fortification is just a policy change. So there is many things has to be put it in place to make it a mandatory fortification to be enforced. So a successful example is the universal salt iodization. While it was it became mandated, The enforcement happens slightly later. So that gives a leeway for industries to prepare themselves to making sure that the mandatory fortification, they are able to achieve it. So I would say to the long, very straight question is that, yes, the long-term goals should be fortification of the staples for a country like India to address the nutrition deficiencies. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Dipti, over to you. You are back.
Yeah, I don't know, because if I get disconnected again, Jagmeet will take over.
No problem.
And while we are talking about mandatory, Government of India and FSSAI have already considered making fortification of milk and oil mandatory. And for that, they have already invited comments from the people by putting the proposal onto their website, and they're in the process. So if milk and oil get fortified with vitamin A and D, this would be, because these are easy to do, reach everyone. And I'm also very happy to share with you that GAIN has been working in Rajasthan since 2012 on fortification of edible oil and milk. And in 2016, early 2016, government of Rajasthan also made it voluntary mandatory to fortify the entire oil that is being sold in Rajasthan to be fortified with vitamin A and D. Now, the most beautiful part was that when we had this comprehensive national nutrition survey, the results were very, very encouraging, because in Rajasthan,
Okay, I think Deepti is again having some concerns with the net. My question here is, and maybe I can like put this an open question to everybody, that if we are talking about mandatory fortification of milk and oil, somewhere another question is, which we need to ponder, and I would like any of the panelists to reflect on this, is how much is the quantity of milk which is consumed by the Indian population, and what is the quantity of oil which we are recommending. Milk, of course, becomes a food wherein you really need to make a concerted effort for a vulnerable group to kind of be taking in that quantity. Then only you are actually justifying the fortification which you are doing at per serving level. So I would like to invite comments, because there have been some studies by Dr. Marwa in the past, that wherein they have done studies on vitamin D with school going children, and they found that the impact was really not much. So would anyone like to reflect on this?
Ma'am, just to quickly add, the standards that have been created by FSSAI have been kept, taken up the consumption patterns into its purview. And approximately, I think FSSAI would be the best person to share the amounts they've taken under consideration, but consumption patterns have been taken into account for. And I'm sure that, regarding even, in fact, Dr. Marwa's studies as well that you're quoting, it has shown that vitamin D levels were significantly improved in the school-going children. So I'm sure that even though the milk levels are kept at a slightly higher value, looking at the child population, but it suffices for adults as well. And for oil, it's definitely on the lower side. So over to any other panelist if they would like to add in.
Yeah. So one more thought which I want to add to this conversation is that, when you make fortification mandatory, we also have to safeguard the population in terms of the multiple fortification of multiple food vehicles. I think that's another question which we really need to ponder. So if we are making vitamin A and vitamin D mandatory for milk and oil, then we also have to see that, are we also having a vitamin A prophylaxis program going on? Do we also have people taking vitamin D along with calcium supplements which they are consuming? Do we also have vitamin D prophylaxis being taken by, and I'm talking about the adult population, so if it is mandatory, that means everybody is consuming the milk and oil which is fortified with vitamin A and D. So we need to be safeguarded in terms of going above what is needed. So that's another thought which comes to my mind. Any reflections on
I
that?
would like to add on. Yeah,
Yes.
here I would like to add, though I was cut off, but I heard your last point. I would like to just assure you that fortification is done only at 25 to 30% of the RDA. It is the safest and no fear technology. The upper tolerance limit is 600 times the fortification levels, which we can never achieve. So food fortification is extremely safe, very effective. And I was telling you when I got cut off that we have been doing fortification in Rajasthan since 2012. The comprehensive national nutrition survey data, if you would see, the national average for vitamin A deficiency in children 5 years to 19 years is between 15.5 to 21.9%, whereas in Rajasthan it is only 1 to 1.5%. Perhaps universal fortification of oil and milk contributed to that, and that is something we should feel very happy about. Regarding the supplementation program of vitamin A that Dr. Jagmeet mentioned, I would like to tell you that government is already on board, and government has already taken a decision that mega doses of vitamin A would be reconsidered to be given to only children in the areas which are highly deficient. It is Government of India's data, NIN's data, which shows very high levels of vitamin A and vitamin D. These two deficiencies are not only important for vision and bones, they're also for non-communicable diseases prevention, that is cancers, diabetes, hypertension, etc. So I think we should be supporting and encouraging fortification, and mandatory, it would take time, and government would find ways and means to ensure that mandatory fortification is done at a level which will only support and promote good nutrition and never harm people. Mandatory fortification in the West has completely eradicated some of the deficiency diseases that we continue to suffer at a high level. Now, with this, I think we can conclude, if you all agree. If there are any questions that need to be taken up, please let us know.
There are questions in the chat. Deepti, if I can help you,
please
read
read
some of
those
those questions. Yeah.
I think if you can take that on, because my computer seems to be going back again. So
Okay, no problem. I'll take a couple of questions which are there and we'll try to answer. So one is that somebody is confused about the protein source for COVID positive. Should we restrict to vegetarian and not take non-vegetarian at all? So again, from a nutritionist perspective, I think you need protein for a good recovery from COVID infection. That goes without saying. The only safeguard step which you need to take is you have to make your food safe. So which means you really need to, even if you're taking egg or if you're taking a non-vegetarian food, you have to treat it very well, to good amount of heat treatment. You have to follow the principle of hygiene, good washing, cleaning, good quality heat treatment. I think once you subject a non-veg food to all this, I don't think so there's any reason for anyone to worry about consuming non-veg food during COVID infection. That is one. I think the second question is about the new ICMR RDA 2020. Yes, I am a part of the food fortification panel at FSSAI, and the panel is looking at the levels in light of the EAR, the estimated average requirement the RDA and the TUL, the tolerable upper limit. So I think we are revisiting the levels and we are looking at this in light of the RDA 2020. Yes, it's a very good question. And yeah, I think these were the two things which I could read in the chat box. So any last comments? Deepti, are you still there? You want to conclude the session?
I'm very grateful to all the eminent panelists that we had, and because everyone gave very succinct, very to the point responses to the questions, which would help people understand food fortification and also to understand how fortification enriches food as well as our lives. So thank you so much. And I can tell you collectively, all the development sector partners who are working in the area of food fortification are reaching over 900 million people with adequately and appropriately fortified foods, be it milk, be it oil, be it rice, double fortified salt, and wheat flour, and people are improving their health. So 3 cheers to food fortification. Of course, we need to be very careful about the source of micronutrients and appropriate protocols for fortification, but it is a very cost-effective, doable, scalable strategies. Opportunities are there, challenges are also there, and we are all there to meet up with the challenges. So thank you so much, my esteemed panelists, for your very wonderful contribution to this panel, and to the participants who spent their time to be with us today. So thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to all the panel members for joining in and giving us some wonderful insights on food fortification. That was really a very insightful panel. And also a special thanks to Ms. Gulati for wonderfully moderating this session, although we lost you some time, and Dr. Madan for taking over as well. Thank you so much. And we look forward to see you in our next annual.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for pitching in. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you.